Welcome to the session. My boss told me to build a Lightning web component. Now what? All right, my name is Greg Ruiz. I'm the product owner for Lightning Components. And I want to start us off. This actual session was inspired by a conversation that I've had numerous times over the last 4 years with folks like yourselves. Oh my gosh, my boss said we got to build a component. I don't know what I'm doing. Where do I start? So that's what I wanted to walk you through today. All right, before we begin, I need to make sure that everyone is seeing clearly. What do you see? How many of you are seeing a Lightning page, a record page? If you're raising your hand right now, you're doing it wrong. Because what you should have been saying is, I see components. You see, because components are literally everywhere. Everything that you see inside of Lightning Experience is a component. From the smallest button to spinners to up to cards and progress indicators, and the whole thing, everything is a component. Hey, did you know what a Lightning page is? It's a component. Exactly. It's just the biggest component that you can build. So everything is a component. And that's what we need to start thinking a little bit differently when we are in the Lightning component world as opposed to being in the Visualforce world where we thought in terms of the entire page. With a component, I can change functionality on a page, just a small bit, right? And that's what we've actually been tasked to do. So that was all my slides. Let's dive into some actual real demo. All right. So our boss has come to us, and our boss, we're at the Dream House, which is our fictitious real estate company that helps manage their properties and brokers through Salesforce. And our boss has come to us and said that a lot of the agents are complaining that they have to go down here and they have to mouse over the broker's link right there and wait for that preview panel to pop up in order to find the phone number or the email address so they can contact the broker about that particular property. So what we want to do is we want to build a component right now to put up front in the upper right-hand corner of the right-hand column so that people can always just glance over there, maybe even just click the link for the email, and boom, we're off and running, contacting that broker about this property, right? Sounds easy? All right, so where do you begin? Well, the first thing that we need to do is to figure out how we're going to build that. And of course, that means we're going to need to run over to the component library. Now, the component library is your one-stop shop for finding all of the building blocks, the little Lego pieces that are going to come together to build your component out. Because remember, components are everywhere. Everything is a component, and the way that we think about building today is just like you thought when you were a kid, you got home from the toy store with a new box of Legos, right? You pull it out, there's a bunch of tiny bricks, you started putting the tiny bricks together, they got bigger and they got bigger until you finally had an end result. Well, that's the way we do here as well. And that's what all of these building blocks are for. Now, I will throw out a word of caution. We have a number of different building block categories down here. For example, we see Lightning, and we see a bunch of things that look a lot like things that we have seen inside of the Lightning experience, but these are all what we call Aura components. These are the older components that we've been using for the last 4 years. What we're interested in now are Lightning web components. But if I was to toggle open that section, you're going to see basically the same list that we just saw in Aura in Lightning Web Components, because my team has gone over the last several releases and created Lightning Web Component versions of all of those old Aura-based components. So we're going to be concentrating here. Now, one of the things that we know, in order to make our component look nice, we're going to need to make it fit into this layout. So we remember that in the Lightning experience, when it first rolled out, you remember that everything was white. There was that white background. And a lot of our customers told us they got a little snowblind looking at the page. And that's why the Lightning Design System team, the UX team, went and gave us these separators, the colored background. And so now everything that we do is placed into what we call a card, so that it sort of sits out on its own on the page, easily recognizable. So what we want to do is we want to run over here and find out about a card. So I'm going to switch over to card, where we're going to actually see a preview of the card. And then here inside of the documentation, I can read all about it. I can see my specification for a card. But let's go back to the example, because what I want to do is I want to notice that down here we actually have the code necessary to create the card that we're currently looking at. Now, I want to show you a little tip. You can actually share this when you get home, because I'll bet you that some of your colleagues don't actually know that this works. inside of the component library, while you're looking at the code right here, I can actually go in and begin to type, and look what is happening. My card is actually updating live while I type the code right here on the component page. Now, you can do that to begin to get ready, or the other thing to do is to simply say, hey, I want to go ahead and open this in the playground, because we've given you a playground where you can go in and experiment. And this is what you're going to do a lot as you're learning to build your Lightning Web Components. So for example, maybe I want to go into the HTML for my card, and I want to say your broker. That way people know what is going to be there. Say your broker. I'm not actually interested in having a button in there, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. In fact, I don't think we need a card footer there either. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, and I'm going to say broker info goes here, right? So I'm going to go ahead now and save this. What do I mean? Save? What are you doing? I'm going to save this. Why would I save this? Well, as I'm working along, I don't want to make a mistake. Everything's working right now. So in case I make a mistake, I want to be able to go back to that. Wait, how would I do that? Well, you see, even as I continue on, I'm going to go ahead and change this. By the way, I don't like to use a p tag. I want to use a div tag. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to a proper HTML tag, just like that. I'll save this again. Now, each time that I've been saving, up here, there's actually been a number that's been incrementing itself, right? What's really cool about the playground is I can actually take this. We'll take this whole URL. I'll copy it. We'll head over into a new tab, and I'm just going to paste that right in. And you see, I can actually send this over to my colleagues. They can actually see exactly where I am in my workflow, right? They can help me out if I run into problems. I can tell you that we actually use this internally on our teams every now and then to say, hey, somebody's reporting a bug. Well, let me go in and try it out. And I can actually test it out here in the playground, pass it over to one of my engineers to have a look. Now, if I want to know what this thing looked like before, I can just simply go back, change the number. I'll change it back to 1. And we are going to go right back and see exactly where we were before when it said just your broker info goes here. And we had still had the P tag, right? So this is really, really cool. Really cool way of being able to iterate over what you're doing. Now, of course, when you're ready, if you would like, not only can you save, you can also download this. So you can download it as a zip file. Send it off to a colleague, or if you would like, just go ahead and put that into your Scratch org. Now, Scratch org, what am I talking about? Well, when we are developing now, we are no longer using the developer console. When we're building in Lightning Web Components, we're going to build using VSCode. Now, VSCode is a text editor, an actual IDE, if you will. And we made some plugins. So I've gone ahead and installed VSCode. I've gone to the marketplace for VSCode. I've downloaded the Salesforce extension pack and added that here to my environment. So that means I can now work with Scratch orgs. Scratch orgs are the modern way that we develop on Salesforce. They allow me to spin up a replica of my org that only lives for a short time so that I can actually develop. All of the code is actually going to live locally on my hard drive and in GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever my source repository is, and I'm no longer going to have my org being the single source of truth. Now my repo is the single source of truth. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new component right here, and so I'll just type a keyboard shortcut in VS Code to bring up my command palette, and I'm going to type SFDX, where you're going to see I've got a whole bunch of commands here. The top one right there is create Lightning Web Component, and that's actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, let's create a web component. Let's give it a name, and we will call this your broker. Just like that, and I'll just put it in the default location. And as I do so, you'll notice that over here on the left-hand side, I now see that I have my component created. Now, if you've done Aura development before, one of the things that you're going to notice is there's a lot of missing files, because in the Lightning Web Component world, we don't have as many files as we did back over in Aura. In the Lightning Web Component world, in fact, only the JS file is actually mandatory for our web component, the JavaScript file, because we can actually have components that do not have an interface. So we don't even need to have an HTML file if we don't want to. But that brings me to HTML. HTML is now the file ending for the component because Lightning Web Components are based on modern web standards. The component consists literally of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now you might be thinking, hey, wait a second, Greg. I know that we had HTML back over in our Aura components. Yes, you did, but in your component file, not only did you mix in HTML, you also had things like Aura attributes, Aura handlers, and all sorts of things. There was sort of a hodgepodge of information happening inside of your component. Well, in the Lightning Web Component world, that's no longer the case. The Lightning Web Component world says your HTML file shall be pure HTML and HTML only. Everything else, all the rest of the action is going to happen over in the JavaScript file. Okay, so we had a component that we were building back over there in our playground. So I'm going to head back over there for a moment because I can just grab that same component code. I'm just going to copy that, and I'll head back over here. And now I'm just going to paste that right into my template file. And once I do so, I'll go ahead and save this. And now I would like to go ahead and make this available to App Builder so that we can put this on a page and begin to see this component as it comes together. In order to do that, I need to understand where does that happen in the Lightning Web Component world. In the Aura world, we would do things like we would add an interface. We would say implements flexi page available for all page types or available for record home or something like that to say what pages we were going to. Well, in the Lightning Web Component world, all those things happen right here in this metadata file. Now, in order to make this easy on myself, I'm just going to copy and paste some information from another component that I've already created, and that's called my targets. So I'm going to go back over here, I'm going to copy that, and then I'm just going to paste that right in. So those targets are going to tell this component, or tell App Builder when to display this component in the left-hand column when we're looking at a page. So my admin knows, yes, I'm allowed to use this component on this particular type of page. If I don't want the component to be put on a page, for example, I don't want it on the home page, I can just simply remove that target. Right? So it's just those targets that are going to be allowing me to display this. All right, so I now have that done. The last thing I need to do is to go ahead and say, yes, in fact, I want to expose this. So I'm done, I'm ready to expose this to App Builder. Let me go ahead and save. And now I need to just go and tell SFDX to push this up to my default Scratch org. So I'm going to go ahead and push this up to my org. And once this is done, we can actually go over and we will see that as we move back over here, we go into App Builder. I'm going to edit my page. We're going to see that, yes, in fact, if we close down these standard components, we are going to see that, yes, your broker component is right there. We can drag that out. We can drop that right up here on the page. We can save that. And now we are ready to finish off our component. So we have our broker card up there. So now let's do a little bit more coding. I'm going to head back over here for a moment. And of course, I want to make this HTML look a little bit nicer. I want to have, for example, I need an icon there too, so I'm going to go ahead and add an icon. So you'll notice as I begin to type here in VSCode, we're even getting code hinting here. So it tells me, oh, icon name is something that you can specify. So I'm going to go ahead and specify an icon. I'm just going to use a good old custom icon. I want to say custom 85. You all love custom 85, don't you? That's a beautiful icon. Do you remember that one? I have no earthly idea what icon I just asked for. Of course, if I really wanted to know, I would go over into the Salesforce Lightning Design System and look up the name of the icon that I was interested in using. But we'll hope that this is the right one. Now, I'm going to do a little bit more copying and pasting here because that saves me some time. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of code right here. I'll copy that back over here. And we're just going to pop that right in just like that. And what I've done is I've actually used another base component, a base component called Lightning Record Form. Lightning Record Form is going to allow me to display the broker's contact in a form. All right, and even allow me or a user to go in and update information in that form. But it's all done with one single line of code. The only thing I now need to do is to figure out what is the logic that is going to provide the broker ID to this form, because that is the key. Once a record form sees an ID, it can handle doing all the other things for me. right? So how do I do that? Well, again, once again, I'm going to go over and just do a little bit of copying and pasting, but first I want to introduce you to the JavaScript file. So the JavaScript file contains two major sections. The first section is this section up here where I'm going to do some imports. I'm going to be importing some functionality from the Lightning Web Components framework. The first thing that I'm importing is the Lightning element itself. This is simply saying, hey, I am a Lightning Web Component. Right? So that's what we're going to do, and then we are going to have all the rest of the action happening right down here inside of the class definition for my particular component. Now, with Lightning Web Components, we are moving into the modern JavaScript world, so we are also supporting JavaScript classes, and that's why I was telling you all of that. So now, let's go ahead and figure out how do I deal with this. I'm going to grab a little bit more code, because that way it's going to save me from having to copy and paste too much for you, or write too much for you, I should say. So I'm just going to copy, I'm going to paste, I'm going to go back and do one more copy paste. And then I will explain all the things that I have just copied. I'll do that, pop that right in here, and I will paste, and I'm going to save. I'm going to go ahead and push this up so it can be doing its job. And then I'm going to walk you through all of the things that we just pasted. Now, I didn't paste a whole lot of code. As you can see, it's actually not much at all. Whoops, and I just did something back over here. Whoops, did I miss something? I missed something in my copying and pasting. Let's make sure that I've got everything right. Oh, there you go. Copy that. My fault. I had actually remembered that I was going to define something dynamic. So our card is no longer going to say your broker. Instead, it's going to say something else. It's going to tell me what the name of my broker is by looking up the address of the thing that I am currently on. And then, going back over here, we are saying we're going to import another item. What are we importing? We are importing actually something from the UIRecord API. The UIRecord API is what we call under the covers Lightning Data Service. Lightning Data Service is actually going to go out and grab for us the record that we are currently on. Why? Because the record that we're currently on contains that broker ID. So that broker ID is what we need to go to pass over to our record form, so record form can go out and find out what is that broker's, do the query back to the database, find out where the broker's phone number, email address, and all of that is. All right, with all of that, I will hope that I have done everything that I needed to do. And this time, push back up. And once we have pushed, whoops, and I have done it again. Let's see, what am I doing here? What is? Oh, thank you. Oh, that is wonderful. It's wonderful. Thank you. That was actually not intentional, but it was awesome that I did it. Okay, I'm getting an error down here saying, dude, you're asking me to do some things that you've not told me how to do because you didn't import the right things. So I've got these things right here called @API and @track. These are what we call decorators. Decorators are our ability to decorate a variable and tell it to do something. So what am I going to do? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decorate, I need an @API, so I'm going to add this. API, that is, if I can type. API tells me we are going to expose this variable to the outside world. So we can allow other things to set this, like, for example, in our case, the page. The page needs to tell us what record we're on, right? So we're going to say, hey, allow the page to tell me what record I am on. Then we have @track. @track is my ability to go in and say, let's track what the value of this variable is, because I've defined this variable back over here in my HTML. So I've said, hey, this is a variable. How do I know it's a variable? Because it's surrounded by curly brackets. So it says, okay, go figure out what card title needs to be. Go figure out what broker ID needs to be, and go figure out which fields that we're interested in. And that is why back over here, we are saying I want to track my card title, I want to track my broker ID, and I want to track my broker fields. All right, finally, the last is my @wire. So I have an @wire right here, so I'm going to say @wire. And @wire, the way that I like to look at @wire is to say @wire is wiring up some data to my component, right? So I'm saying, all right, let's wire something up. What am I going to wire up? I'm going to actually wire up that get record. If I can move over here so it quits highlighting. So I'm going to wire up this get record. I'm going to pass the record ID that we have just received back from the page. The page has told us this is the record ID, and I'm going to pass some fields. The only fields that I'm interested in are the name and the broker, right, from our page. Now with all of that done, I should be able to push this back up, and we'll come back here and look at the code one last time after we see that we have successfully done it, and we have. So now as I refresh our page over here, we're going to see suddenly, boom, I have my Lightning component built. And it's built using that one line of code, which was that record form. The cool thing about that is, Michelle just said she got a new cell phone. You know, she lost her cell phone. She had to go get a new number. So she's going to need to have that updated. It's now 3. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And you can see that that has just been done. And it was all done with a single line of code. In fact, if we look back at that code one more time, the only thing that happened was when those results came back, we took the value that was coming back, we checked to make sure that there was data in that value, and then we simply assigned that back out to the broker ID. We said go into the data that came back, find the broker field, and find out what its value is, and then let's concatenate together the name of our card and say it is the broker for, and find out what the name of the property currently is, and that is how we got to that card. And we did it all in under 20 minutes. Oh my gosh. Was that cool? All right, there's a ton to learn about LWC and building components with Lightning Web Components, but at this point, sadly, it's my time to go, so I will step off. I'll be happy to answer questions. I want to grab my computer. I'll move back to the back if you have questions. Otherwise, have a great rest of TDX, and we'll see you at Dreamforce. All right?